What up, Halls? Thought I'd pop on here and make our daily video. And today I actually had a real life example of overcoming a pattern, and I just wanted to tell the story of what happened in my own life, and that I think that by slowing it down and reviewing the play, it will be very helpful for everyone. I also just wanted to say that anybody that is in Ukraine, and even Russia, I'm just like, my heart's just broken right now, and I'm praying for you. And I know that, not all the Russian people agree with Putin, so I'm sure there's people, on both sides that are, having a difficult time, but my heart goes out to the people of Ukraine. And I've just been thinking about what it must be like for everyone, men, women, children, older people, differently abled people with different needs and different mobility, and sick people in the hospital that can't leave, or prisoners that are locked in jail who are trapped and who are just like listening to these explosions. Is just, my heart just breaks. And I just wanted to point out that, mystically speaking, when your heart is broken and you're like weeping on behalf of someone else's pain and suffering, that's a very powerful energy to pray from, because it's in the spirit of agape love and sharing and giving, and you're not thinking about yourself at all. So, if you're feeling helpless and you're feeling heartbroken, you're actually really powerful right now, and you should be sending prayers to all of the people in that region who are going through this conflict. And I know that we're all just so tired of that toxic, masculine, aggressor, imperial agenda. It's like I think most of the people in the world are like, we were just over it. Like, we're so ready to just live in harmony and get along and take care of each other and make sure everyone's fed and sheltered and clothed and educated and has clean water. And hey, let's all just start thriving and living in unity. And I think so many of us are leaning in that direction. And the pendulum, it always just swings. It swings so in drastic polarities. We've been in a very aggressive, ego-driven, survival-driven humanity for so long, so many thousands and thousands of years. And we did used to be more feminine and cooperative and village, kind of tribal oriented, where we all took care of each other, and there was that at one time. And I think that the solution in the future is not to go into another polarity of toxic feminine, where it's like we don't have enough strength or boundaries, or the ability to be the good version of the good warrior. So we need a balance. We need a balance of healthy masculine and healthy feminine in this world. And so I feel like the Putins and the Trumps are like that last attempt, in the horror movie where the killer has been stabbed by the teenage girl who he was gonna kill, and she's fought him off and he's dead, and then she turns around one last time to see if he's dead, and he's like, nah, this is their last grab, because they can tell that they're a dying breed, that their idea of life is going by the way of the dinosaur. And so they're throwing their last big fits. And I just don't see this as the way that the world is going to continue to go. I just don't. Ain't nobody got time for that. Everybody's sick of it. And I think people are starting to think more and more and realize how we've become so divisive and just bickering and fighting and politicizing issues that shouldn't be politicized with, what we've been going through for the past few years. then I think that gradually people are going to start waking up. I mean, there are a percentage of people who are looking on in disbelief going like, what the fuck is it going to take to like let everybody open their eyes and see like where our priorities should be. But we're going to get there, people. We're going to get there eventually. But I'm going to shift gears and go into another. So we've got our mystical secret for the day, which is when you are weeping and crying and sorrowful on behalf of someone else's suffering, like genuine, not in a codependent way, but in a way that you're in your own sovereignty, you're in your own boundary, but you see something happening and it breaks your heart and you want to do something about it. That is a very powerful place to be in. Not victim, codependent. I'm so sad. I'm enmeshed with people and like I'm so empathic that I'm feeling things that don't belong to me, thinking they're mine, but like literally like standing in your own sovereignty, being like heartbroken on behalf of another human being because you have an elevated consciousness in that moment. You're being the ideal version of humanity. So that can get subtle if you have, you know, codependent issues and you're overly empathic with no boundaries. But hopefully in this like big world example, it's obvious. Like, okay, we are heartbroken on behalf of this country. We are using that heartbrokenness as that divine spiritual alchemy where we take that pain and we channel it into something, into light. And actually, in this case, it's good if you can take a physical action like donate or find out what organizations are already on the ground who are already ready to start, you know, like put your money towards the thing that is going to be the most efficient and like gets the most done. Put your, you know, power behind what's going to help the most, but also your prayer in that state is very, very powerful. So you can do that. And that is it will actually help. Okay, now I'm shifting gears. So we've been talking a lot about, and we always in spirituality, we talk about breaking our patterns and overcoming like our ego. And when we're triggered, pausing and making a proactive choice and going against our, inclination for instant gratification and going back to the root of those triggers to find out like where they are and where they come from. And so last night I had an example of this playing out in real time and I watched myself experiencing it and watched it happen. So if you have been watching my channel recently, you may have learned that I have taken a hiatus from my freelance film career. And I want to pursue my readings and this channel and my spiritual, all of the above. Like I'm a mystic artist, poet kind of thing, blah, 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 intuitive coach. So I am developing that in this year, and I have gotten a job at a nice restaurant that only does dinner so that I have my days open and I only have to work a few days a week and make really good money. So I've been trying to like simplify to amplify. So in that, I have had to relive some experiences because I used to work in the restaurant industry before I was in film and television production, and I got like super burnout and I had like severe anxiety disorders and like trauma from it and nearly lost my mind, and it was crazy, but I was like working downtown and it was totally different circumstances. So having grown and done all of the spiritual study for like 10 years, I'm now full circle back at a restaurant thinking I would never do that again. But actually I found out that it was kind of everything in a job that I was looking for. And I was like, okay, well, I can go into it with a different attitude this time. And I know how to manage my energy, and knowing what I know now, let's see how I react. And let's see if I can be go in on purpose and manifest each shift that I want. And so far, with prayer and with round the clock help with as many self-help modalities as I can get, I've been able to do just that. I have been like a wizard every shift. I have prayed beforehand, or I have set an intention to center myself before I go in, have a really good time and just really appreciate it and not take it too seriously and not get my feathers ruffled and don't care about what anybody else is doing. Just stay in my lane, do my absolute best, be excellent, and try to grow and try to overcome like this insecurity, this like social anxiety, like caring too much about like making a mistake, like all of those things. Like this is a perfect like playground to do that in. So I have sensory issues where I'm like hyper aware and sensitive to like everything that's happening around me. So in high stress situations, if I'm not to the point where I can just mindlessly go through everything and like be on autopilot, until then I can get to the point where it's like a computer where it's like the pinwheel of death, or like the video that has to buffer. Like I'll get to a point where I'm maxed out of here my bandwidth and I'm like, and I freeze and I need a second to like untangle all my thoughts. Okay. So I've been reluctant to, I don't know, get overly confident about asking for, shifts on busy nights. Like I've gotten to the point where I can like pick up Saturday night or Friday night and not feel too scared. I haven't taken any huge sections yet, but I like, except for on slower nights, but they've still filled up, and it's like, okay, so I'm like really stretched to my max and I'm like skating by on thin ice, but I think I'm doing good and I'm getting better at every shift. And I haven't done anything terrible yet. Like so far, I mean, I've really done well. It's just that like, as far as like my comfort zone, I'm still getting there. So I go in last night and they have, there's not a lot of us working, and there's some large private parties going on, and I'm not exactly working with the people that are usually the most proactive and like quick and like ready to jump in there. Like, they kind of meander and they're like in their own world. So I'm like, okay. And then they have me in a section where I've got one of the large party tables. Like this is usually for like, say for like the seasoned people that have been there a long time. And I'm like still like fresh on the floor, like wobbling around in my platforms kind of thing. And I'm like, oh shit. And my first impulse was, this is out of my league. I can't handle this yet. Like this is a terrible mistake. And I'm like, maybe they weren't thinking and they thought I was the other Liz, because there's like Elizabeth and a Liz that work there too. And I was like, maybe they thought it was the other one. And I looked at the floor and I was like, no, there's no mistake. And I was like, well, maybe they just weren't thinking. Maybe I should say something. Maybe I should trade it out with one of the more experienced people who are in a smaller section. And I had to pause. And it was so funny because I was like, this is so my pattern right now, is like I'm feeling fear and I'm about to give away something to stay in my comfort zone. And I'm like, no. And it's so funny because I could feel it as a pattern coming up, and it was almost like a faded memory of feeling. Like I could feel that like my autopilot wanted to go in that direction, but it wasn't as strong or as concentrated or as visceral as it used to be. It was like the volume had really been turned down. And so I was like, okay, pause. Why is this in my movie? I was like, I'm being triggered. I'm feeling like a little bit less confident than I should, because I can handle this. And I'm like, God won't give me anything I can't handle. And this is a blessing coming to me, and I don't want to like push it away. And the restaurant clearly thinks that I can handle it. And they probably have seen that I'm like a consistent hard worker, regardless of the fact, and I contribute the best I can, as often as I can. And I have a good attitude. And so they're probably wanting to give me a better section. And so I'm like, okay, I'm not going to push this away. I can handle this. And I'm like, what is the worst that is going to happen? I'm going to be anxious for a couple of hours. Like, we don't even have like long shifts. So this is only going to be terrifying at most, at worst, for a few hours. And I'm just going to do the best I can. And I've been yelled at before in my life. I've failed at a lot worse with a lot higher stakes. Like, what's the worst that could happen? I mean, I don't think I'm going to get fired, you know? So I was like, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to take this shift. And it was so crazy because I could see that I was reluctant. I was fearful, but I stopped. I paused. I asked why this was in my movie, and I followed the trigger back to other times in my career, like back at Big River when things were horrible all the time. And it was like, everybody was constantly in the weeds. It was turn and burn, high volume, huge building, you know, needy, cheap clientele. I mean, it's different when like you're going to different, you think that places that were cheaper because people are like, oh, we're the salt of the earth. We're so humble. Those aren't the good customers. They're needy, they're rude, they're always trying to pull one over. It's like they're the worst. And actually, when people are like, oh, are the rich people the mean ones? It's like, no, they're all chill, they're relaxed, they're having a good night. Like, no one cares. Like, it's not like the end of the world. So it's a different clientele. It's a different experience. I'm a different person. I'm bringing in a different attitude, and I can handle this. And I, thought back during my film days, whenever I would have to, you'd be pushed out of your comfort zone. It was trial by fire all the time because there's not any like training. You're just like learning as you go. And the budgets are a lot bigger than in someone's dinner tab, And so I'm like, okay, I can handle that. I can handle this. So I did, I just want to make sure I'm not skipping over any of the steps of like unpacking it. So if I followed the trigger back and I remembered like all the trauma that got me there, and I was like, okay, I wanted to make a free will decision, not my pattern. And so my free will choice was to say, you know what? I choose enthusiastically that I'm going to receive whatever the anxiety that comes with this. I'm going to just push through and get stronger. And pretty soon, that'll be the faster I do this, the faster I just rip this Band-Aid off, the faster I'm going to get better, and the faster I can start making more money. And so I leaned in. I allowed this to wash over me, all the discomfort, and it really wasn't that bad. Like, I was very anxious at the beginning of the night, and once I got like that first large party out of the way and that first big round of like drinks where you're just like, what is what? Oh, I've got to pour all these wines, and like I got caught up and I was able to like get everything, all the courses switched over in time, and it was fine. And then I got a couple of large parties, and let me tell you something. In one situation where I stopped, I practiced restriction. Oh, that's what I was forgetting. I practiced restriction, built the vessel. So the restriction was being able to resist my urge for instant gratification, which in this situation would have been to avoid the discomfort of being put into a situation where I could embarrass myself, fail, or just be like super stressed out. The restriction was no. I am going to sit with this feeling for this shift. I'm going to be in it. I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to build strength, and I'm going to build confidence in myself. And I feel I deserve it because I'm going to work hard, and I am going to show up and be a good worker and have a good, strong ethic and be a good teammate. And all of the years that I have been in other industries, I deserved it then, and I didn't get it. And then in this situation, the sky is the limit. There is no ceiling to what I can make here. So I deserve this, and I'm worthy of it because I'm going to be doing just as good of a job as anybody else, really, at the end of the day. And so I went through it, and that restriction strengthened the vessel. Remember, the vessel is the container for the light that you can receive. My vessel before had been a smaller section. But I was able to practice restriction and face my fear and not self-soothe into something easier, that smaller section. I pushed myself and my vessel into a bigger section. I stood firm in my worth and in my faith that God had sent it to me and that I was going to be able to handle it. And I'm here to tell you that I doubled my income. Doubled my income in one decision, in one moment where I decided to pause and not sell myself short. So imagine now that I'm like, and after last night's shift, they released another upcoming schedule, and I have like prime shifts that people, that have been there a long time get. And it's because of my work ethic and my good attitude and my energy that I take with me to work. And it's really been paying off. And it's interesting the way that when my mindset shifted, I've been able to like do less and get more for it. And not that I'm doing less because I'm giving quality. I'm showing up. I'm not slacking at all. I'm giving 210% and I'm giving it to everybody else too. And I go into that restaurant and I'm telling you I do opening side work, even if it's not mine, so that we have what we need. And I'm not being petty about it. I just want everything set up for success, and I don't care if it's my job or not. I'm doing it. And because of that, I seem to have more ease and more harmony, and like everything is just easier. And so I thought it might be good to just hear it in real time and hear a real example of how it has played out. And I don't say this to brag. I'm just saying this to give you something that gives you an example that you can see it play out step by step and feel like, oh, this is totally doable. I can do this, or I see how I can apply this in my own life in this particular situation that I'm in. So I hope this is helpful. I hope that it's been helpful to see the play-by-play of the whole pause. Why is this in my movie? Pause, what a pleasure. Why is this in my movie? What it is to practice restriction, and how you build the vessel, and how you actually see a pattern, trace it back, and overcome it in real time, and how fast you can benefit from it, and what a huge difference it could make. I mean, it could double your income. I mean, I know that each shift I go in is dependent. Like I could make different amounts of money each shift, but on average, what I make, I doubled that average. That maybe even a little bit more than doubled that average that night. So it really does, like, things, when you make an effort, the universe will match it. And it may not be that fast. There may be a delay, but the stronger your magnetism gets and the more self-mastery that you achieve and the higher your consciousness goes, like, the faster that things can come through. And that might be different in different areas. And it just depends on the timing of your life, because you may be in a time period of confusion, fog, darkness, and it could be divinely orchestrated that way. I was just in like a year or so period where I was in a complete fog and I couldn't get any answers or any specific details about direction. And I knew it was like kind of supposed to be like that, and it was not a comfortable time to be in. But sometimes that's how it goes. But I'm just going to talk myself into circles, so I'm going to say goodbye now. All right, you guys, I'll see you tomorrow. Much love.